Well, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome in to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7, 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion LA Sparks. And ladies and gentlemen, it's hard to imagine that it's been a full year since fans of both the Sparks and the WNBA were greeted with shocking news on this date last year, when it was announced by the Los Angeles Times that Paula Madison informed WNBA President Laurel J. Ritchie that she was relinquishing control of ownership of the marquee franchise of the WNBA, the Los Angeles Sparks. Good evening, everybody. Alongside Chris Amanci via Apple's FaceTime on our tape-delayed coverage of tonight's show via Apple's FaceTime from the Anaheim Studios in Anaheim, California. Cal McClure joining you here from Studio 171 in San Diego. This is day one of Sparks Watch 1 year later. Chris, good evening, man. And it's hard to believe that this time last year we were talking about heart attacks, strokes, cardiac arrest, among other contagious diseases that were brought up by the Sparks fan base on Twitter. Chris, does today still make you feel nauseated or sick to your stomach whenever you think about January 2nd at this point in time last year? Or whenever you think about today, man, what is your thought process like when you hear about January 2nd with what happened last year?
Just can't believe it. 1 year ago.
Chris, it's been amazing as to how much time has really flown by here. Of course, this time last year, a tough day, I think, Chris, for every fan of the WNBA. Of course, tough for Sparks fans, but of course, Chris, I think the man too tough though for the entire fan base of the league as a whole, because we know what has happened to the W in the past, Chris. How 9 different franchises have folded in the league, to where, Chris, we nearly had, presumably, man, the death sentence of the league, have the Sparks left or folded. And again, we're not going to go too far in depth here. Of course, we're going to be saving our time here for what happens for the next days in the future. Now, again, folks, we will bring you folks as much as we can tonight. Now, again, we're not going to be doing the entire 35-day wrap. We're going to be going, basically, folks, by important dates in the timeline in regards to the sale of the Sparks, big dates in between up until the last day of the Sparks being bought on February 5th by Magic Johnson. But, Chris, if we go back to today, man, today felt weird, to say the least, Chris, of how last year, we were celebrating, Candace Parker having her number retired at Tennessee this time last year before their game against their SEC opponent last year, Chris. And then, Chris, kind of like how out of the blue, how Stu Faber told us, and how Shorty and Crystal and fans of the team, Chris, told us how they reacted to that first news, Chris. But then, Chris, when the first news broke, though, Chris, as we go back now to last year of this time, Chris, when you got the first news from the LA Times, from friends of yours on Twitter, Chris, you got the news, man, your initial reaction was what?
Just shocked and very surprised.
Yeah, Chris, I think surprised is a good word to use. Shocked, stunned is another good word, I guess, because, Chris, this was sort of like, Chris, being tasered by a police officer. Just how this sort of came out of the blue, and it was like electrical voltage that nailed you, because, again, it was just, out of the woodwork. And again, we know this happened, that it initially started on December 31st with the email sent out by President Malcolm to the Sparks employees. Then it grew hotter and hotter. Than today last year, you heard the news. And, Chris, I'll be fair, Chris, as you may know, or you folks may remember, when I told the story here, is I was out walking my dog, and I'd come back home because I wanted to see if one of my channels was going to be showing Candace Parker's jersey retirement on television. Of course, that didn't happen like normal down here in San Diego. But, Chris, it was after I'd finished walking my dog and I'd gotten home, and settled down for a bit, and then started going through Twitter, Chris, and that's when Shorty, Lex, Jack Nick, Vicky, all the fans, Chris, started coming out with heart attacks and strokes, cardiac arrest, man. Yeah, Chris, you know the drill about what happened, man. And when that happened, it's sort of like, okay, wait a second, okay, something is not right here if they're flipping out this much. And it was Shorty and Chernisha, the first two people, Chris, that were on the scene Chris, when you saw the fans though kind of doing that, you know, with all the diseases, man, that I know are very contagious to our health, man. When you saw that, were you a bit puzzled, or what was your reaction to seeing the fan base sort of doing that flipped out mode, I guess, when you saw that going on?
Just like, what the heck is happening on and everything?
Kind of caught you off guard, I'd say. I mean, when you saw that happening, you know, then, Chris, I thought it was something like in regards to like the Sparks trading Candace Parker to some no value-added team over the offseason, but then as the news grows, but as the spectrum brightens a bit, then you see, okay, Paula Madison is leaving the franchise for ownership, again, citing reasons, again, of financial reasons, but again, that first news breaking, though, Chris, was just so shocking, I guess, when that happened, because, again, you wouldn't expect this, Chris, to happen to one of the founding members of the WNBA, Chris, like L.A., Phoenix, Utah, San Antonio, New York, Chris. And you know that New York has their own problems going on right now over there in the Big Apple right now, but Chris, I don't think you would expect this type of move from one of the core four or Final Four franchises from 97, Chris. Would you, though, man, have expected a move like this to come with maybe a lesser team like Tulsa or Seattle, but Chris, I think we could probably see that happening, but Chris, would you expect it, though, to come from one of the founding members in one of the cornerstone organizations of the WNBA that this problem would be going on with the Sparks, the Mercury, the Stars, or the Liberty?
Yeah, probably someone else bringing in the news.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all can agree, I think, that if it was someone else, Chris, if it was someone other than the core four, maybe there would not have been the same sort of coverage of the story. But again, Chris, I think, man, I would have reacted the same way if it was the Mercury that had gone up for sale, the Stars, or even the Liberty, Chris. And you know, it's a tough one to talk about with this happening. And of course, Chris, the player that I guess sort of was in the wrong place, wrong time, Chris, was Candace Parker. She was back from Ekaterinburg this time last year to get her number retired at Tennessee. Before their women's basketball game. And Chris, before we get to, Chris, we're going to talk about Candace real quick here. Again, Chris, Shorty Mamba told us this during our Fab Form show the night before the season tipped off this year, when we had gone back and recapped the off-season petition efforts to keep a team in LA, how we all brought up that Candace was happy and all to be there, to be the star attraction, the main event of the night. But of course, Chris, something told everybody, though, whether they're a fan of hers or a fan of the Sparks or not, Chris, something told everybody, like her body language or her smile, that she did not feel comfortable, I guess, being in that moment because she had heard the news about the Sparks ownership leaving, Chris. I know that you're not much of a Parker fan as much as I am, but Chris, when you look back, though, what would you say about Candace's appearance, though, at her jersey retirement, Chris? Because, I mean, it looked like she was, thankful to be there, of course, some time off from playing over in Russia, but, of course, Chris, there was just something that led everybody the wrong way about, okay, I think this is not the best time to be seeing her right now because of what's been going on with her WNBA franchise, Chris. What would you say, though, about Candace Parker at her retirement ceremony last year at UT? What would you say and why?
She just didn't seem like herself and just didn't want to be seen right now.
Well, I don't know if she wouldn't want to be seen, Chris. I think she just probably was. I think it was sort of in the back of her head, I think it was sort of like, this is so great to be here, but at the same time, though, will I even be in LA this next season? Now, folks, we'll take a brief pause right here. You folks remember I interviewed Candace back in September for a school assignment. I did ask her about her initial reaction, folks. We will play for you folks, courtesy of iTunes. We will play you folks part of Candace's interview with me back in September about her reaction to hearing about the Sparks ownership leaving. Here you go.
I was in shock because it was retirement, so I was a little confused and didn't know quite what was going on. There was a time there where we had no idea whether we were even going to be in Los Angeles or where we were going to be. But, I believe that sometimes you just have to let things play out. And things happen for a reason. Things happen not always the way you want them to, but the way they're supposed to. And you can't change stuff, so you just have to roll with it. And I think it love the ownership group. I think that they're really into making, Los Angeles Sparks, into a great franchise and an organization that's going to be a winner, and that's, what we all want to be a part of. So I'm extremely excited.
Candace Parker visiting Cal's Corner back on September 26th of this year, talking about the Sparks ownership problems that, again, arose during her retirement ceremony at UT. Chris, as you caught that snippet again, man, about Candace saying, she was in shock because it was right before and during her retirement about the news coming out. Chris, your thoughts about hearing Candace speak about that issue? Because, again, man, I know it's sort of a tough subject for us to talk about sometimes because, again, you're talking to a pro athlete about her franchise possibly folding or leaving. And again, Chris, not only is it just a franchise, it's the franchise, the WNBA, Chris. Your thoughts about how Candace reacted, though, about the Sparks ownership, though, leaving during and before her jersey retirement?
Just very emotional that the Sparks owners had to leave right before her big day, her jersey retirement. Again,
folks, Candace Parker spoke to me for an interview back in September and again asked her about the entire saga with the Sparks ownership. Again, Chris, it's one of those things, man, raining on your parade, I guess, again, man, because we know, man, that Candace was playing over in Russia, was doing her thing with Ekaterinburg, Chris, and finally had some time off to come back to the States a bit. She had come to L.A., flew into L.A. from Ekat, and then had gone from L.A. to Chicago to see her family and friends, and went down to Knoxville. And again, Chris, it's just, wrong place, wrong time almost, of how the news leaked and came out. Again, before and then during her retirement ceremony, again, with how the news came out about that happening. But Chris, Chris, we'll go from Parker back to you, because, of course, man, I think you may have been on your way home from work when I told you about the news about the Sparks ownership group leaving. Chris, when you'd finally gotten home, settled down, and finally, got a chance to relax for a bit from your day at work, Chris, what was your gut reaction and your overall recap of the first day of the Sparks watch when you heard about the ownership group leave?
Just very stunned, and that the Sparks owners left and just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, man. It's been as we'll say it for a bit. It's been shocking. It's been a lot of things about the Sparks situation. And again, with Chris being at work, at least, folks, my reaction again is I had left my house to walk my dog again. I wondered, and I left about maybe 3 o'clock because I knew that the game was at 5 to see if anyone was going to have the game on one of my local television stations down here. Of course not. I live in San Diego. Come on now. When I'd gotten back home, and I had settled down and checked my guide and said, okay, it's not going to be on television, so I'll just go check it out somewhere else. I had gone on Twitter just to see what was going on and basically broke it with retweets about Candace being back at UT. And then it was Shorty and Trenisha Hardy, the first 2 people I saw that were freaking out, that had the heart attacks, the strokes, cardiac arrest, so on and so forth. And again, Chris, as we go back to both of our subjects here, again, Chris, when, man, you went and you saw our Sparks fam, you saw Shorty, you saw Trenisha and Vicky and Jack Nick, T-Wow, Elisa, all the fans, Chris, that we made friends with during the postseason in 2013, man. Again, I thought it was something internal, like the Sparks had traded Parker, traded NECA, traded one of the big franchise stars for nobodies, basically. But I guess when you kind of dug deeper down in the ditch and down in the well, then you saw that it was the ownership leaving, and it's sort of like, it was just as worse as someone being traded. That was a big-name player. Initially, Chris, shocking, stunning, but also, man, sort of, that bad taste in your mouth, because, again, Chris, we know, though, man, that 9 different WNBA franchises have folded in the past entire history of the league, man. That, Chris, the Sparks could have been the 10th different franchise to fold, man. And what could have been the end of it for the entire league itself had the Sparks folded, Chris. It still is amazing, again, of how things change, I guess. And Chris, we're going up from us, Chris, how about the fan bases? The Sparks, of course, Chris, got hit the hardest, but of course, Chris, your thoughts, though, man, about how the fan bases of the other 11 teams reacted. Sort of, Chris, again, sympathizing with the LA fans again about, you know, that this may not go well if, in fact, LA leaves the league, that we, as the other 11 teams in the league, Chris, may be in trouble ourselves. What do you think about that? What would you say about the other 11 team fan bases? Because, of course, we know about the Sparks fan base, you know, getting worked about it, Chris, but also, man, thoughts about the concern that the other 11 teams had, though, for the entire league itself, because they think that, because, of course, they're thinking, you know, great, if LA folds, we're probably going to fold as well because the league's going to probably go under, Chris. What about the other fan bases that we made friends with, like Rashad, Kirby, Jessica, other fans, Chris, you know, their thoughts, I guess, about seeing the Sparks almost go down in flames?
Probably didn't know what was going to happen to the state of the league around the WNBA. Thought it was going to fold or something, since it would have been an odd number of teams. Just didn't know what was going to happen and everything.
Chris, I think the other fan base, again, man, this is why, folks, we say all the time here that the WNBA fan base is the greatest fan base of all time, because, again, Chris, this wasn't a scenario, again, where it was something going wrong and other fans criticizing the team or things getting blown out of proportion. Chris, was more so like they need to do something for the Sparks to keep them in Los Angeles, to keep this league afloat, because, Chris, we know about what we say all the time about how great our fan base is with the WNBA, but I think, man, that Eric and Tim, Kirby, Rashad, and Jessica, who are all great friends of ours that are non-Sparks fans, Chris, they realized, you know, they're smart enough, Chris, to know what the Sparks mean to the WNBA as a whole, because we all know about what the Sparks mean, Chris. I mean, they're only one of four, well, technically one of three original teams from '97, minus the minus San Antonio, who, of course, relocated from Utah, Chris. But, of course, Chris, again, man, I know we talk about the other teams, Chris, but, of course, man, what do you think, though, Chris, the other fan bases were thinking about when they heard about the Sparks ownership leaving, Chris, in regards to everything included about the Sparks with the fan base? Chris, how about the other 11 teams, Chris? What were your thoughts, though, I guess, about, or else, Chris, let me rephrase it here, Chris, because I kind of got put off track here by Candace Parker, by CP retweeting me on Twitter, but, Chris, what would you say, Chris, was going through the minds of the other fan bases when they heard about the Sparks situation going on?
A lot of people were going crazy and just starstruck at what happened.
Yeah, I think the other fan bases, Chris, probably have the same amount of things going, you know, the same amount. Oh, great. Thanks a lot, Candace, because now you're going to be blowing up my Twitter feed because, as you folks know, again, 1 year ago today was Candace's retirement ceremony at UT. So she retweeted, let the Parker fans and the Team A3 members come out in full force. But, Chris, we'll get to one more bullet point here before we move off track from day one here, Chris. Once more, man, just reiterate, man, your initial gut reaction to hearing the first news from the Sparks fan base about the ownership group leaving.
What?
Give us a little brief recap of your initial first reaction. And also, Chris, Chris, your initial reaction, also, man, what was going through your head that entire rest of the day when you heard the news that the Sparks ownership left?
I just felt shocked on what happened, and just thought the Sparks were done and buried and everything.
Folks, I am so sorry. I'm sorry that you guys are having to hear that little vibrate going on, but thanks a lot to CP3, Candace Parker, for retweeting me, folks. The entire Team Ace3 members are all going crazy now because something I posted during the day, so that's why you're hearing that little beep going on in the background. Chris, give me my initial reaction again was a bit salty, shocked, stunned again. Of course, Chris, I think, though, man, it was only shock sort of out of the blue, man, because again, Chris, it was the Sparks. It wasn't the shock. It wasn't, you know, a no value-added, you know, struggling franchise, Chris, like Tulsa or Seattle, Chris. It was the mothership the mother franchise of the WNBA, Chris. It was the Sparks that had basically just had gone underwater here. And again, man, Chris, I'll say one more time, but again, man, I don't think if it was Phoenix, LA, or New York, Chris, if it was someone other than those three teams, it may not have gotten the same sort of hyper publicity, I guess, in the press with that happening. Would you agree?
Agree.
So again, folks, day one here now, folks. We will iterate here real quick. Again, now we're not going to be doing this for 35 straight days. We're going to be only doing this, folks, on certain days during our Sparks Watch. So, folks, here's our upcoming schedule. And by the way, folks, real quick, we did not mention this, folks, but also, by the way, we are having a pretty major technical problem in my studio right now. My laptop charger is done. It is broke, so we cannot right now stream our events live on the web. So unfortunately, folks, what we're going to be doing here for a while here is going to be doing a tape delayed show. So we're going to be recording the show at 10 o'clock. You'll be able to catch the show at 10:35 once we work out a few small glitches and edit it a bit. So again, we'll have no live coverage for the next couple of days. But folks, our upcoming schedule though for Sparks Watch goes as follows here. We will have 4 straight shows to open Sparks Watch. We have tonight, tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday. We have January 3rd, January 4th, and 5th, and January 6th. Tomorrow, we'll go more in depth about why the Madison family left. Sunday, we'll break down the first ownership group that came in the fray, Joe LaCobe and the Golden State Warriors on Sunday. And then on Monday, the other big day, of course, Chris, on Monday, on a CP Monday, Chris, we talk about the day that got us the fame, Chris, the online petition that was sparked online to save the Sparks in LA. Then on Tuesday the 6th, we'll talk more about what the Sparks leaving or folding, what their impact on the league would have had they had left for the Bay Area or presumably folded. Then, folks, after the 6th, we'll come back on January 12th when the Warriors were moving in and nearly closed their deal to buy the Sparks on January 12th. On January 14th, we'll talk more about the petition campaign where we hit the 1,000 signature mark. January 17th, we'll talk more about the fan base of the Sparks who had put down their season ticket deposits. January 24th, we talk about the first initial news of a LA ownership group being involved with the Sparks. And then, of course, on February 2nd, Joe LaCobe and the Warriors don't close the deal, and of course, we'll wrap up Sparks Watch on February 5th when Magic and Mark bought the Sparks. Chris, if we look ahead to tomorrow, man, we're not going to go too much in depth here as we get ready to close out the show for the night, but of course, Chris, tomorrow, man, we sort of talk about the reasons why Paula Madison left, and also, Chris, we'll talk more about the hurdles that the WNBA goes through, but of course, Chris, we know, man, that right now, man, money's tight for everybody in the economic time we're in right now, but of course, Chris, you know, man, that franchises in pro sports are worth a lot of money. But, Chris, I never thought that the Sparks would be worth over $12 million. That is how much, folks, that Paula Madison and her family lost when operating the Sparks since they bought them from Jerry Buss and his family in 2007. Chris, we know that money is a big deal in sports, but, of course, Chris, in your wildest dreams, though, man, would you ever imagine a WNBA team, Chris, being worth $12 million in your lifetime, or what do you think about that?
No, I didn't know about that.
So again, folks, tomorrow we will be talking specifically about the Madison family leaving, the reason why, and also we'll talk more about the ongoing problems the league faces. And Chris, I know, man, that we talk about it occasionally about, you know, how much the league is ripped and criticized because of whether it's the number of teams, it's the play on the court, whatever it is, Chris. But also, man, the fans that always give the league a hard time, Chris, they don't know, though, and they never will, though, know why, you know, basically, you know, they'll never know why the league struggles so much because, again, Chris, you know, we know that the money's tight, man. We know that there's, you know, set salary caps. The players aren't paid a lot, Chris. But of course, man, we know there's a lot of hurdles, man. Chris, other than the lack of respect against Chris, what other hurdles, though, in your mind, does the WNBA go through? And also, man, and Chris, I'll ask this to you as well, man. What things, though, in your mind, stick out in regards to why the league struggles, and why do you think, though, Chris, that as well, man, fans that are not from the sport, why do they always give it a hard time, I guess, is what I'll ask here. So again, Chris, just to rephrase the question, reiterate my question again, Chris. You know, why do you think, Chris, the league struggles for one, and also, man, when do you think they're going to start getting the respect it deserves?
Agreed. I don't know when they'll get the respect that they deserve.
Chris, you didn't answer the first question. What do you think, though, are the contributing factors as to why, though, teams and the sport have really struggled, though, for the entire soon-to-be 19 years of the league's existence back in '97? What are the reasons, though, why the league and the teams continue to struggle financially for whatever reasons it might be, and why?
Probably because there's not enough teams in the league, and it's girls basketball, and probably the people don't want to care about it.
Thanks a lot, Candace, for blowing me up, but I do thank you very much, of course, for talking to one of your best friends on Twitter. But again, that's what that little beep was, folks, again, on the side of Chris on FaceTime. Chris, I think in my mind, though, man, that the contributing factors, man, is just, as Candace told me, again, thanks a lot again, CP3, for your retweet, but again, Chris, I think, though, man, that people have seemed to compare the W to sports that have been around for the past 60, 70, 80 years, you know, MLB, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, so on and so forth, Chris. And yeah, we know there's problems, Chris, but of course, man, there has been improvement again. But of course, Chris, I mean, it's not good, though, man, to sit here and see us again that $12 million was lost by Paula Madison and her family when they bought the Sparks in 2007. So again, folks, we'll talk more about the reasons as to why the Madison family left the Sparks in the dust, and also talk more about financial problems facing the WNBA, and also we'll talk about why the league has struggled for so much over the course of time. So again, folks, remember here, we're not going to be here for the entire 35 days. We'll be here for the first 4 days, tonight, tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday. So again, folks, to reiterate our schedule again, so tonight was initial reaction to the news. Tomorrow, at about probably 11:30, maybe midnight tomorrow. We'll see about them again because I have a soccer game I got to work tomorrow night, so we'll work on that tomorrow. But tomorrow we'll be having the WNBA struggles tomorrow. Sunday will be when the Warriors first intervene in the situation, and of course on Monday when these two buffoons over here made the online petition to keep the Sparks in LA. So again, folks, tomorrow is WNBA struggles. Sunday is the Warriors intervene for the first time. Then on Monday, the guys with the petition come to the rescue. Chris, if you're getting ready to sign up here for the night, again, man, we know we've been sort of waiting. We've been waiting for this point in time, man, to go back and revisit what happened last year with the entire debacle that was with the Spark situation. Chris, as we look back, man, your final thoughts on tonight's show, and of course, Chris, your lasting thoughts about how far we've come in a year since today.
Just that. Great. Where we came through 1 year ago from now. Just can't believe it. 1 year ago. And everything.
Tell you what, Chris, I had a very sick feeling in my stomach when I went and took Rodney out for a walk today because I knew what had happened after I got home from walking him last year today. And I thought to myself, okay, is Magic going to sell the team for the hell of it today, or what in the world's going to happen now because of what happened on this day last year? But of course, as I came home, nothing to worry about, so today was a Scott Clean day, except now until Candace Parker, my go-to girl, one of my BFFs out there on Twitter and Instagram, of course, retweeting me about her jersey retirement. With that, folks, we'll see you folks back here tomorrow night for day 2 of Sparks Watch. 1 year later, the year that almost ended the LA Sparks and almost ended the WNBA. Until tomorrow night, folks, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you all for coming, and good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We still are LA, and we still are the WNBA. See you folks back here tomorrow night for a late night show again, talking about the WNBA struggles and why the Madison family initially left the Sparks in the dust after the 2013 season. See you folks back here tomorrow night, right here on LAS 365. See you folks tomorrow night. Bye-bye.